Good evening and welcome to the Monday, September 22nd, 2025 regular meeting of the City of Burbank Planning Commission. Before we begin our meeting, there will be one general period of public comment tonight during oral communications. Persons speaking during the general public comment period may provide the Planning Commission oral communication on any matter concerning city business. Members of the public may comment in person or by telephone during the general public hearing public comment periods. If you would like to participate in the public comment period by making an in-person comment, please present a complete speaker card to the planning staff. If you would like to participate in the public comment period by telephone, please call 818-238-3335. We will announce when the phone lines are open. Please join me for a moment of reflection. This moment is intended to begin our meeting with a positive and collective support for our beloved community. The Planning Commission welcomes everyone joining us this evening. We encourage you to take a moment to reflect on our community and the work we will be doing tonight. Although each of us has our own unique reasons for being here, we are united in our passion for our wonderful city. As we pause, let us consider our own individual contributions, what they mean to those around us. Let us find solace in knowing that working together with a shared spirit of community and partnership, we will always act responsibly for the betterment of Burbank. All right. Will everybody please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Clerk, may we please have a roll call?
Vice Chair Wick.
Present.
Commissioner Safarian.
Present.
Commissioner Van Gorder.
Present.
Commissioner Bennett.
I'm here.
And Commissioner Mendez.
Great. Do we have any announcements from city staff?
No announcements.
Great. Moving on to item number F, the election of chair and vice chair. Now is the time for the Planning Commission to vote to select one member to serve as chair and vice chair for a one-year term. All right. Do we have any nominations for? Do we do vice chair first? Is that?
I think you could start with whichever one you want. You want to start with chair or vice chair? It's up to you.
Okay. Do we have any nominations for either?
Madam Vice Chair, I'd like to nominate Vice Chair Samantha Wick for chair.
Great. Thank you.
I will second the nomination.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, do we need to do a roll on that or?
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Wick.
Yes.
Commissioner Safarian.
Yes.
Commissioner Van Gorder.
Yes.
And Commissioner Bennett.
Yes.
Commissioner Mendez.
Yes.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. No longer acting. I've been acting since November. All right. Could we entertain motions for vice chair, please? I would like to nominate Paulina Safarian for vice chair.
I'd like to second that.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right. May we have a roll call, please?
Chair Wick.
Yes.
Commissioner Safarian.
Yes.
Commissioner Van Gorder.
Yes.
Commissioner Bennett.
Yes.
And Commissioner Mendez.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Madam Vice Chair. All right. We're moving on to item number G, reports to the commission. Now is the time for reports from city staff. The city attorney's office will present and discuss topics including the Brown Act, Public Records Act, conflicts of interest, and other best practices.
Good evening, commissioners. I'm going to address you from the dais because I feel like if you have questions, it's easier to see me this way. As Commissioner Van Gorder pointed out, in the interest of transparency, our video recording right now has the wrong date on it. Today's date is September 22nd, 2025, not January 8th, 2023. My name is Lisa Kurihara. I'm an attorney for the city, and tonight we're going to be discussing transparency laws that apply to you as members of a local legislative body. May I please have the presentation? while we wait for it to load. I know some of you have probably done this training with me before. Some of you have done it with other boards and commissions. Some of you did it 2 weeks ago while you sat in at Art in Public Places. And for some of you, it might be your first time going through it. I always like to tell members that the goal of this evening is not really for you to become experts in the law. It's very dense. We're going to cover a lot of different topics, and frankly, there's not enough time tonight for any of us to become experts. But the goal is for you to be able to issue spots, so that if you run into issues moving forward, it kind of, raises that little red flag that maybe makes you reach out to city staff or my office and just ask the question, hey, we talked about Brown Act, there was this conversation that happened online, I just want to ask, is this an issue? Please feel free to reach out to us early. If nothing else, the biggest takeaway is if you have any questions, reach out to your staff early, because some of these issues can be very fact intensive. We're going to kind of cover the rules that are outlined in the law and in various regulations, but beyond that, there's a whole body of case law and administrative regulations and decisions that sort of tell us how we interpret these rules. And so going through your specific fact patterns can take time. And so to give you the best advice, it's always best if you can contact us early. When you get your agenda packets the week before the meeting, if you are going through and you see an issue, shoot us an email or send us a voicemail, give us a call. Any sort of prior notice is the best way you can get the best advice, rather than kind of tapping me on the shoulder when I walk in on the Monday night of Planning Commission. So with that, let's get started. All right. Why are we here? Oh, shoot. You can't hear. Hang on. How do I stop this? Hold on. I'm not sure how to play the sound, frankly.
Please don't deny us The Simpsons. We need the whole experience.
This is like my one thing. I can grab your attention with The Simpsons. Right here.
If anybody tunes in right now, they're going to be very confused.
I know. Apologies, technical difficulties. We need one of those, like...
These are great jokes.
Oh, boy. All right, show of hands, how many of you have done this training with me before? Or with one of us before? Okay, so some of you know these jokes very well already. I have to admit, I still have not seen The Simpsons. I haven't I know. It's like definitely a mark against me. So some of these jokes are lost on me. I know. It's terrible. Once my kids grow up, I'll have time to watch The Simpsons. But for now, let's go through. All right.
That's odd. Why are all those cars parked at City Hall? Ay, caramba!
Welcome to this secret meeting made possible by the fake disaster drill. And now for the reason we are here. The results are in. This town has voted unanimously to get rid of Springfield's unending nightmare, The Simpsons.
No!
Okay, so this is what we want to avoid. This is what the Brown Act wants to avoid. No secret meetings. The Brown Act guarantees the public's right to attend and participate in meetings of local legislative bodies. So the general rule under the Brown Act is that all meetings of a legislative body must be open and public. Keyword here is transparency. And we'll kind of go through each of these elements through this presentation. So what is a meeting? A meeting includes any gathering of a majority of the members of the commission at the same time and location to hear, discuss, deliberate, or take action on any item that is within your subject matter jurisdiction. So here you are a commission of 5 members. A majority of you is 3. The second element, meaning that you are discussing at the same time and location, is really construed quite liberally. So we're going to kind of talk about some situations that could inadvertently create a meeting that may not seem like a meeting to you. Basically, the main takeaway is to avoid making decisions or taking positions on items that are under your subject matter jurisdiction outside of a formal meeting here in council chambers. So as the Planning Commission, your jurisdiction is outlined in Burbank Municipal Code Section 21411. Essentially, you have all powers and duties granted to the commission by any provision within the code, as well as any power or duty accruing to you via Section 215 of the City Charter. The Planning Commission is very unique. It's unlike any of our other boards and commissions in that you derive some of your powers from state law. And so under the government code, the city is authorized to delegate certain functions over local planning and land use to the Planning Commission. And that's what council has done when there are sections in the Burbank Municipal Code that say the Planning Commission is tasked with approving these types of decisions, and so forth. The council has reserved some powers over local land use and planning to itself, and there are some reservations under state law where there are preemption issues. So when we talk about a meeting, there are scenarios where we could inadvertently run into an informal meeting outside of a regular meeting tonight that, again, may not look like a meeting to you at the time, but I just need you to be mindful of when these conversations could raise red flags, because a majority of you could inadvertently be involved and thereby technically violate the Brown Act. So the first type of meeting setup that we're going to talk about is what's sort of commonly referred to as a daisy chain. And if you assume all of these characters on the screen are planning commissioners, you have a situation where Commissioner Moe says something about a project to Commissioner Homer. Commissioner Homer conveys similar information about that project to Commissioner Lisa, and Commissioner Lisa speaks to Commissioner Janey, and a majority of you have now discussed an item that's within your subject matter jurisdiction outside the confines of a regular meeting. Basically, in this case, the commissioners have all committed a Brown Act violation if they're talking about Planning Commission business. And you may not realize that your one-on-one communication with your fellow commissioner is leading to a public meeting, but it's something to just be aware of. I think when in doubt, I would just respectfully tell your colleague, I appreciate hearing your position on this. I would love to talk about it more during our upcoming Planning Commission meeting. And just rule of thumb, the safest place to talk about commission business is here on the dais. Why are these problematic? Because the public doesn't get to hear how you deliberated and how you kind of came to your conclusion on a matter. Also, I don't know if I always bring up this example, but when I was in elementary school, we used to play that game telephone where one person would think of a message and they're all sitting in a line and they whisper the message to their friend sitting next to them, and that person whispers the message to the person sitting next to them, and so on until the last person in the line yells out the message. And it's usually something completely different than the first person, which is what makes it funny. But that's always kind of what you risk in these informal meeting situations where you're really not sure if the information you're hearing is accurate because you're hearing it, secondhand or third hand, really, in some of these scenarios. So the other type of informal meeting setup that we want you to be wary of is where one person sort of acts as an intermediary to communicate a message to a majority of you. So in this example, you have Commissioner Homer talking about a project to Commissioner Lisa, then Commissioner Homer talks about the same project to Commissioner Bart, and then Commissioner Homer discusses the same project with Commissioner Marge. And again, a majority of commissioners have now talked about a project within their jurisdiction outside of a formal meeting setup. So again, just be careful. Even one-on-one conversations amongst yourselves may seem benign at the time, but if a majority of you have been contacted about the same topic, it could inadvertently create a meeting that would be in violation of the Brown Act. All right, so meetings in the digital age. Technology has really made it so much easier to inadvertently hold a meeting that violates the Brown Act. And so again, I just want to warn you about some of these instances so that you don't inadvertently stumble upon them. Keep in mind that you can inadvertently have a meeting over email or even over text messages if a majority of you are involved in a conversation about planning commission business. One of our biggest rules of thumb here is if you feel like you need to email information to your colleagues, please email it to your staff liaison first. And that way, our staff members can determine if it's information that should be shared ahead of the meeting via email, or write back and say, hey, this is a great piece of information to share, why don't you announce it during the planning commission meeting on Monday. Similarly, if you do end up emailing your colleagues, please try to blind copy them. This is not a foolproof way to avoid a meeting, but rather than put each recipient in the to line, put them in the BCC line, because it makes it harder for folks to just hit reply all and inadvertently start a group conversation. Again, not foolproof, but just sort of a small practice tip. Social media can create a meeting situation if a majority of you are commenting on a post that involves planning commission business. This is particularly true for things like, if there's a project that's coming before the commission and maybe a neighborhood group strongly supports it or opposes it, and they create a Facebook page to talk about it and garner support for one position or another. If you find that a majority of you are commenting on posts that group is putting out there, you could be inadvertently stumbling upon a meeting situation. The laws around social media are truly still constantly in flux, and we're getting new laws on it all the time. One recent addition to the Brown Act was that they clarified you can respond to individual members of the public via social media, and one-on-one responses in that fashion are okay. However, if one of your colleagues posts something on social media and it involves planning commission business, even if just one of you responds to that post, it's a violation of the Brown Act. So unfortunately, no likes, no comments on your colleagues' posts about planning commission business. And again, this relates to matters within your subject matter jurisdiction. So if your colleague is posting about, an upcoming Halloween event at the park, or I think our golf course is hosting a Halloween brunch, and they're just putting an announcement out there, totally fine for you to like and comment on that post, because the Planning Commission doesn't do business and doesn't have jurisdiction over that Halloween event. But if your commission or your colleague is talking about an issue that's about to come up before the commission, please refrain from commenting it on social media, because it just takes one of you in that instance to create a Brown Act violation. One thing I will briefly mention is that teleconferencing rules are also in flux. Pre-COVID, there was very little room for members to teleconference in. During COVID, if you recall, most of our boards and commissions went to full remote meetings. And during that time, there were a series of sort of emergency actions that authorized it. As a general city policy, we strongly discourage teleconferencing because we want the public to be able to interact with you face-to-face and have the opportunity to come down and give their public comment, hear what you're saying. However, there are some exceptions written into the law. The caveat here is there is a bill that just passed in the legislature. We're waiting to see if the governor signs it. We'll know by beginning of October whether or not it gets signed or not. That could change these teleconference laws even further. So if you ever need to remotely call in, please do try to notify us ahead of time. Typically, under current law, the exceptions for that would allow that are if there's a just cause exception, meaning you came down with a last minute illness, you have a child who's at home sick and you can't get coverage, or if there's an emergency circumstance. And the rules around each exception are a little bit different. So again, just reach out early and know that teleconference laws could change. All right, so we have a couple of exercises for you here. Quick show of hands. I don't know if you can see the photos on the screen, but we're kind of going to go through a few scenarios that may or may not constitute informal meetings that are subject to the Brown Act. So I don't know if you all can see the picture on the top left-hand corner of the screen. It looks like a party. There's a disco ball. There are people kind of hanging out, having some drinks. Does anybody think this is a meeting subject to the Brown Act? Nobody raise their hand. Fair. All right, so I will tell you, under the Brown Act, social gatherings are permissible unless a majority of you start talking about planning commission business at that social gathering. So if you're at a holiday party and you're, celebrating, whatever holiday is around the corner, absolutely allowed under the Brown Act. But if 3 of you congregate in the corner and start talking about a development project that's, coming before the commission in January, that would create a potential Brown Act violation. So be aware, if you're in a social setting and 3 of you are huddled in a corner and you're not talking about commission business, please be loud about it so that people around you don't think you're having a secret meeting. You're absolutely welcome to talk about other things, social, things. How are your kids doing? How was your vacation? Just don't talk about commission business.
Now, I know the city council has gavelled in meetings at like the State of the City address and other places
Yes.
that I would have thought would have been exempt from the Brown Act, but they still gavelled in a meeting regardless.
Because topics came up that were within the council's subject matter jurisdiction.
Okay.
So luckily for Planning Commission, your subject matter jurisdiction is a little bit narrower, slightly. But I think, again, general rule of thumb, avoid majority discussions at these social gatherings. Let's see here. So the next one I have on the screen, it says lyrics workshop with Tom Petty. Anybody think that's a Brown Act meeting? Or could be a Brown Act meeting? I know. You guys have the one with my change. So if it says planning workshop with Tom Petty.
The intent is that's within our subject matter jurisdiction.
Exactly. So a lyrics workshop, not so much within Planning Commission's business, but a planning workshop, yes. It could be a Brown Act meeting, and so you would need to agendize that. You would need to open it to the public.
Well, if it's a party planning conference, is that within
Probably
our
a little bit different, unless it's a land use party planning conference.
Okay. I was confused for a second about my jurisdiction.
All right, let's see. What else do we have? Okay. One-on-one conversations with members of the public. Do we think these are meetings subject to the Brown Act?
No.
Correct. So, yes, the Brown Act allows you to engage one-on-one with members of the public, again, as long as you're not using that person as an intermediary. So don't each of you meet individually with the same member of the public and start having that person facilitate indirect conversations among 3 of you, if that makes sense. One-on-one conversations, totally permissible.
Okay, but let me clarify that real fast. So presumably a member of the public could want to talk to each one of us individually.
Yes.
Which is fine.
Yes.
Which could then, presumably if they met with Mike first and then with me, they could tell me what Mike said.
Exactly.
Just because they're talking about it.
Exactly. And I have had this question come up before, and I think one thing I would recommend is that you preface your conversation with that member of the public as, saying that you're here to discuss whatever questions they have specifically for you, but you need to caution them that if they start talking about another commissioner's point of view on the topic or sort of facilitating information in a way that leads to a majority kind of collective deliberation outside of a public meeting, you will stop the meeting and you will reserve it for the dais. I know, tough to do, but hopefully issue spotting it ahead of time will prepare you. All right, so other types of meetings that you are allowed to attend open and public meetings of other legislative bodies. So again, as long as a majority of you aren't discussing Transportation Commission business at another legislative body's meeting, it's okay for a majority of you to attend. If Planning Commission topics come up at that other meeting, it really should be noticed as a joint meeting of, let's say, the Transportation Commission and the Planning Commission. All right, let's see. Go back to the slides, please. Okay, so what does open and public mean? Essentially, meetings have to be accessible to the public. We cannot meet behind locked doors. It's less of an issue here when we're meeting in city council chambers. The doors are usually open, but we do have some boards and commissions that meet in, smaller conference rooms. I mean, literally, you cannot meet behind a locked door. The public needs to have physical access to the meeting. Public commenters also have to be given the opportunity to participate in your meetings by speaking to you during general public comment, as long as the topic is within your subject matter jurisdiction. Something that's kind of a tough pill to swallow, but the law does allow members of the public to criticize the commission as well as any other legislative body. Members of the public are allowed to criticize individual members. They can disagree with the position that you're taking. However, members of the public cannot willfully disrupt a meeting. So what that means is that if someone is interfering with the meeting in a way that makes orderly conduct infeasible, they can be removed from the meeting after given a warning if they continue to engage in that disorderly conduct. And of course, if their behavior involves the use of force or threats of force, that person can be removed immediately without a warning. So I say that just to explain that the public's access to meetings is not without its limits. The other part of an open and public meeting is properly agendizing all of the topics that you're going to discuss at your Planning Commission meeting ahead of time, putting it on an agenda and publicly posting that agenda both online as well as in a public place. This is really important so that members of the public know what you're planning to talk about at your upcoming meetings and can attend or listen in if it involves a topic that's of interest to them. And so along those same lines, the agenda is really your roadmap to the meeting. And what that means is generally you are prohibited from discussing items that don't appear on the posted agenda. Again, it can be really unfair to the public if you bring up something, even if it comes to mind at the last minute. But if you bring it up without having it been posted on the agenda, if the public was really interested in that topic and wanted to hear your position on it or wanted to weigh in on something, we're really depriving them of that opportunity by talking about things that aren't on a posted agenda. There are a few exceptions to this rule. Members can briefly respond to public statements or questions, even if those questions or statements aren't on the agenda. You can briefly ask clarification questions, make a brief announcement, briefly report on your activities that relate to public business, provide information to staff, or request staff to report back in subsequent meetings on topics within the commission's business. I think on Planning Commission's agenda, you typically have an item towards the end that says introduction of additional agenda items. Again, the key here is be brief. If you want to have a robust discussion about a topic that's within the Commission's jurisdiction, notify staff and we will properly agendize it for a future upcoming meeting. If I ever flag you from the corner, it's not because I have anything personal against what you're saying or you, it's simply we have to be mindful about what we're talking about in order to respect the confines of the law here. And I know it's tough because Planning Commission meets sometimes several times a month. Other commissions sometimes meet quarterly. So it can be really hard when something's not on the agenda that you really wanted to talk about. If you think of something, before a meeting, reach out to staff and we can figure out if there's a good time when it can be placed on an upcoming agenda so that it can be discussed in public. So there are consequences for violating the Brown Act. I don't expect any of you to run into them because you're taking this training tonight, but the city can face civil lawsuits, which include attorney's fees, as well as overturning any actions that are taken in violation of the Brown Act. There can also be criminal actions brought personally against individual members if your action was intended to deprive the public of information they were entitled to. So we're going to move on to conflicts of interest. And again, the purpose here is not for you to be an expert in conflict of interest rules. It is simply to remind you that as a legislative body member, you are tasked with exercising your powers without personal bias, and instead, deliberating and making decisions primarily for the benefit of the general public. So when we talk about conflicts of interest, there are three main categories of conflicts that I want you to be mindful of. The first type of conflict of interest is, they're known as financial conflicts of interest, and these arise under the Political Reform Act. This is probably the one that you will run into the most as a planning commissioner, and it basically involves decisions that may have a positive or negative impact on any of your personal finances. We'll go through that a little bit more in the next slide because there are a lot of different categories of personal finances that could raise a potential conflict, and again, it's probably the type of conflict you'll run into most sitting on this commission. The second type of conflict of interest are Government Code 1090 conflicts. These are conflicts where you may have a personal financial interest in the outcome of a contract that you are negotiating or approving as a commission. You probably will not run into this because Planning Commission does not typically have power over approving contracts. It's something, though, that you might see at the City Council level, and certain staff members are subject to this rule as well. And the third type of conflict are what are kind of referred to as common law conflicts of interest. And this is basically just the general rule that if you have personal bias in the outcome of a decision that prevents you from acting fairly or outside of the benefit of the general public, you may not participate in that decision. Again, we really strive to avoid even the appearance of impropriety here. And so if you've voiced a really strong opinion one way or another on a project in the past and it prevents you from considering all angles of the facts and considering your decision in a fair way, it's probably best that you recuse yourself from that decision and disclose why, so that the public understands that, you're recusing yourself in the interest of the public, so that your personal bias isn't interfering with your ability to properly make decisions on behalf of the community. Yes.
I just wanted to ask a question, because some of us work, for the government and for other public agencies. So if, let's say, there's an applicant that you work with typically in another city and they are also an applicant that is coming before you on the commission, is that a conflict of interest?
So again, it depends. And I would say these are very fact-specific inquiries, right? So normally, it depends on the nature of your relationship with that applicant. It depends on, whether that applicant, are you going to receive, or is that applicant going to receive any unfair treatment that another member of the public wouldn't receive if you didn't have that personal relationship with them? It would definitely be something that I would advise you to disclose to staff so that we could look into it further, because frankly, there's no bright line rule with regard to that particular fact pattern, but it's something that we would look into. We would dig into the analysis more. So thank you for asking. Okay. So categories of financial conflicts of interest, and again, these are the types of situations where a decision might come before you, and for whatever reason, you may have a financial interest in the outcome of that decision because the decision that's made up here on the dais could affect your personal finances either positively or negatively. So there are kind of 6 general categories of financial interests you need to be aware of. And Any business entity where you've directly invested at least $2,000 in the entity, or where you are a director, officer, partner, employee, or hold some sort of a management position in, if that business entity is before the commission and applying for some sort of land use entitlement, please let us know ahead of time, because that likely will be a situation where you have to recuse yourself from the decision. If you own or lease real property in the city and there's a project that's in close proximity to that property, let us know. The real property rules used to be a lot cleaner. They're not as clean anymore, but a good rule of thumb is if you are within 500 feet or 1,000 feet of a project location, if your real property is within 500 feet or 1,000 feet of a project location, let us know, because it's very likely you may have a disqualifying conflict of interest. Any source of income to you valued at $500 or more and received within the last 12 months of a decision. So I'm trying to think, if you sell something to somebody and they pay $501 for it, or $500 for it, and then that person is here applying for an entitlement, you likely cannot make a decision on that action if the sale happened within 12 months of the decision. Similarly, any person who is a source of gifts to you within the last 12 months of a decision, unfortunately, the dollar amounts are different, but so for sources of gifts, it's where gifts are $630 or more. And just so you know, the gift limits change every 2 years, I believe. So the 630 will go up in 2027. We don't know exactly by what amount yet, but we will come back and let you know. And one that you're probably less likely to run into here on the Planning Commission is any person who is a campaign donor to you of more than $500 within the 12 months prior to a decision, during the pendency of a decision, or 12 months after a decision can create a disqualifying conflict of interest. So again, these categories of financial interest are very lengthy. There's a lot of nuance to the rules. If you see a project's coming up and you think there could be something there, just reach out to us early, because we will absolutely do our best to look into it for you and try to vet whether or not it's something that we think you can participate in or not. So there are consequences, again, for violation of, for acting when there's a conflict of interest. For the city, the action will be invalidated, and if we're sued, we would pay attorney's fees, so it makes these defensive lawsuits very, very costly for the city and ultimately for the taxpayers. For the public official, you could face misdemeanor charges, which may result in permanent loss of any public office for you, as well as some pretty hefty fines, up to $10,000 per violation. So what should you do? We are not your personal attorneys, but we are attorneys for the city, and our interests do align there because we want to act in the best interest of the city. So as I mentioned earlier, alert staff early so that we can try to vet the issue ahead of time and give you the best advice we can as to whether or not your participation is allowed or prohibited. There are a couple of exceptions to the conflict of interest rules. And so there may be an issue where even though you have a conflict, you can still participate. Those are, just briefly, one of them is where a decision affects the public generally in the same way that it affects you. So if a significant segment of the population is affected in the same exact way that you will be by a certain decision, you can generally participate. But there's nuances to that rule, so again, you have to reach out to us early to talk about that. Another scenario would be where your participation is legally required. So if 3 of you have a disqualifying conflict of interest and there are only 2 folks left, you don't have a quorum and you wouldn't be able to conduct business with just 2 people. So we would literally have the 3 who are conflicted out draw straws to determine which one of the 3 could participate so that you have a quorum to act on the matter before you. If you do have a conflict, you are required to remove yourself from the dais. You state on the record that you're recusing yourself due to a conflict of interest, and you remove yourself from the room. The only way that we can truly guarantee that you are safe to participate is if you receive formal advice from the Fair Political Practices Commission, which is a state agency who is tasked with enforcing these conflict of interest provisions. The FPPC will issue formal advice letters in certain instances. However, it can take a while for them to get back to us, unfortunately. So, I'd say that FPPC advice is probably best used when you know that there's a matter that's going to be coming up before the commission. You think there might be a conflict, you're not quite sure. Let us know ahead, even if it's not scheduled for the agenda, and we can take a look at it. If we need to contact the FPPC, we can. If they issue an opinion letter stating that you do not have a conflict, you can rely on that as a safe harbor if anybody ever tries to challenge your participation in that decision in the future. Unfortunately, informal advice from the FPPC, as well as advice even from the city attorney's office, doesn't provide that same cover, that same sort of strength and defense if your participation is challenged. All right. So last topic, Public Records Act. This law is really, staff probably interact with this law much more than you will, but there are some times where the law, staff's role and your role will converge, and so I need you to be aware of the Public Records Act. But essentially, access to information concerning the conduct of the people's business is a fundamental and necessary right of every person in this state. So this access to government documents is not only written into state law, it's also written into our state constitution. So it's actually a constitutional right in California to be able to access public records. And so what are public records? It's any writing containing information that relates to public business that's prepared, owned, used, or retained by any state or local agency, regardless of physical form or characteristics. So it doesn't have to be a paper document. It could be an email, it could be a text message, it could be a voicemail. If it relates to public business, it's technically considered a public record. So the general rule is that public records are open to inspection by the public at all times. Anybody has the right to come and inspect public records except as otherwise provided. And what that means is that there are certain exemptions that are specifically listed in the law that say that govern when we can redact a record or withhold a record. The exemptions are construed narrowly, so it's not, I caution you that no matter what, the safest rule of thumb is to just assume that if you create a record relating to public business, it is subject to public disclosure, because we are really required to construe exemptions narrowly rather than liberally. And so, again, cautionary tale about electronic messages and text messages, things like that. It's so easy to create a public record these days because you send a text message to your fellow commissioner about city business or about planning commission business, or outside of this commission, if I send a text message to one of my colleagues and it relates to city business, technically that's considered a public record. And while I wish I could say this is a situation we encounter few and far between, it's really not. The city receives a request for all board and commission members' emails and text messages. Are these records subject to disclosure? Answer is yes, if it relates to city business. And so, as you can see, this, we have over a dozen boards and commissions in our city. This is a very, very large public records request. Under the Public Records Act, the city has 10 days in which to respond. In certain circumstances, we can gain an extension, but there really have to be some extraordinary circumstances involved, and this might be an example of one of them where there's just a voluminous amount of potentially responsive records. In this scenario, city staff would probably try to do its best to narrow the request. We would reach out to the requester and ask, are you looking for a particular commission member's messages? Is there a topic that you're looking for, or a date range that you're hoping to review? Is it all messages from 2025, or is it all messages for the last 10 years? We don't really know from this request, but they happen quite frequently, and so staff does a good job of doing their best to narrow the requests. But sometimes people really are just looking for any and every city communication. So if this happens and it involves records that are on your personal devices, staff will reach out to you, and both staff and commissioners have a responsibility to make reasonable efforts to timely search for and locate responsive records. So even if they're housed on your personal cell phones, your personal laptops, but they relate to city business, you have an obligation to turn those records over to staff. Staff will look at them, see if there are any exemptions that would allow us to redact information or withhold information. And if not, we would be under an obligation to share those messages or communications with the public. Now, if you have no responsive records, that's totally fine as well. Just know that, again, when staff reaches out, it's not because we're trying to be pesky or snoop through your messages. It's simply we have an obligation under the law to do our best to search for responsive records. And again, under the Public Records Act, there can be some pretty costly consequences if we violate it. We end up paying pretty hefty court costs and attorney's fees if we get sued under the Public Records Act and are found to have withheld records that should have been disclosed. So please just help staff follow the law if they ever reach out. It really is in all of our interests to do so. And be mindful about the records that you are creating and that you may or may not be retaining, because, again, if you're creating a record, just know that it could be subject to public disclosure. So with that, does anybody have any questions about any of this? All right. Well, please feel free to reach out if you do have any questions that come up. We are always here, and the more informed you are, the easier it makes my job. So it's never a burden to answer questions or clarify issues or even just, walk through hypotheticals if you think you might be running into an issue. But thank you for bearing with me tonight and sitting through this, and I know we will all be very transparent in our decision making moving forward.
Great. Thank you so much. Do we have another report tonight on the boards and commissions expectations, or was that just a leaflet?
It'll be during city planner comments. We'll just give you a brief overview of that.
Okay, great. All right, that's a note in file, so great. All right, moving on to item number H. Now is the time for the approval of minutes from the July 28th, 2025 Planning Commission meeting. Are there any comments and/or motion?
I will move to approve the minutes from July 28th.
I will second that.
All right. All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Any opposition? No? All right, minutes approved. All right, moving on to item number H, oral communications. Now is the time for oral communications from the public. Any person speaking during this period may address the commission on any matter concerning city business. Each person may address the Planning Commission for a maximum time of 3 minutes. For members of the public who wish to comment in person, please present a completed speaker card to the Planning Commission. For members of the public that wish to comment by telephone, please call 818-238-3335 to address the Planning Commission. Callers will be placed in a queue until all in-person comments have been received. The phone lines are now open. Please bear with us as it may take a couple minutes for the first callers to get through the line. For callers, please remember to lower the volume on your TV or computer and take your phone off speakerphone when you deliver your public comment. Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers here tonight or callers on the line for public comment?
We have no speakers or callers.
I'm shocked. All right, we'll give it a minute in case anybody is moved by our training and wants to comment. No one? Okay, great. All right, there being no further public comment, I now declare the public comment period closed. All right, now is the time for introduction of additional agenda items. Planning Commission members may introduce new items for discussion, but no action may take place except to place the item on a future agenda. Do members of the commission have any items to introduce? Seeing none, now is the time for city planner comments. Are there any comments from the city planner?
Scott Planbeck, Planning Manager. As part of your packet, we did provide the commission city council expectations of board, commissions, and committee members. At one point, a couple months ago, we did email this out to the commission. We wanted to give you hard copies tonight. The council did adopt this on May 6, 2025. And it's really broken down into 3 sections. The first section is really the conduct of the commission members amongst themselves and how to run a meeting. The second one is the section regarding the chair and vice chair and how they're supposed to run a meeting. And the third is with regards to city staff and how city staff is supposed to support the commission in their role. So we just ask you to review this and sign and hand it back to us after you're done reviewing it. You can give it to us tonight, or you can give us you can return it to us at the October 13th meeting.
Great. Thank you very much. We will now adjourn the Planning Commission to the Planning Commission meeting on Monday, October 3rd, 2025 at 6 p.m. This meeting will be held in person in the City Council chambers at 275 East Olive Avenue. The public is invited to attend the meeting in person or to view the meeting online or on television. The public will be able to provide public comment in the following 3 ways. In person at the appropriate time during the meeting by leaving an e-comment on the city's webpage, www.burbankca.gov/e-comments, or by calling in directly to the Planning Commission meeting at 818-238-3335. Thank you all for your participation and have a good night.